Hi, my name is Monica King. I am a third-generation beekeeper, and I teach classes from beginning to advance, including requeening Africanized bees in southern Arizona. I'm also the current vice president and past president of the Southern Arizona Beekeepers Association. And today I'd like to talk about swarms. That's right, honeybee swarms. So first, let me put a little bit of perspective on what we're dealing with here in southern Arizona. Back, I believe it was in 2008, the Carl Hayden Research Center, our USDA lab here in Tucson, did sampling from the southern border to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. At that time, 98% of the feral hives came back as Africanized hybrids. Also, on top of that, when I say feral, I mean feral, like domestic livestock that got loose, like you consider wild hogs or feral hogs. They're not necessarily wild because they're not native. They are a non-native species. Honeybees are a non-native species. So when people are sitting there talking about leaving things to be, leave them alone, leave them do their thing, they know so much more than you, blah, blah, blah. These are not native to the Americas. There was a species that used to be, honeybee species that used to be, and they went extinct. And these bees were brought in. Our Europeans were brought in by settlers, both from the East Coast and from Spain. Then we also had our Africanized hybrids come up from Brazil. So with that said, these are a livestock. They're considered livestock by the United States Department of Agriculture. All honeybees are considered livestock. If you're keeping them in your backyard, by law, they have to be manageable, which means you have to keep them in something that you can actually do an inspection in. But let's get back to the swarm. What is a swarm? First of all, a swarm is when the original hive becomes so large that they run out of room. And the queen and about 40 to 60% of the population leaves. And the queen leaves behind a daughter. And at that time, sorry, I've got gnats. Gnats really bad out here. And at that time, they go and, she skinnies up, she stops laying eggs, and the hive partly leaves. So there's a hive left behind, and this other hive, the other part of the hive, ends up in a tree or hanging from a porch or hanging under your table or even stuck on the back of your truck. I mean, there's all kinds of places that this ball of bees will end up. So what are they doing? Well, they're hanging out. They're trying to figure out where they're going to go. Where is the next home going to be? So let's say that hive didn't fly that far away from the original location where they swarmed from, their last house. That hive, that swarm that is hanging in the tree that's not far away from their previous home, can still be very defensive. I run into about 1 out of 20 swarms that are just hanging out, that are just supposed to be minding their own business, and they're supposed to not be defensive. 1 out of 20 are. I'm sorry, I have to tell you that. So many people are saying on the internet, they're not going to bother you if they're just in a swarm. They won't be defensive if they're just in a swarm. They won't hurt anybody if they're just in a swarm. Well, most of the time they won't. But stop saying that they won't ever, because sometimes they do. And those of us with experience know that. We know that they do this. With that said, also, if you irritate that swarm right in the middle of while they're trying to decide where they're going to go for their new home, Let's say you decide you're going to throw water on it, or you're going to throw something at it and try to get them to, that's not going to work. You can't do that. You cannot agitate bees and make them go somewhere else. These bees are going to come at you. So yes, give them a wide space, but here's what you need to do. You need to call a beekeeper. So with that said, why call a beekeeper? They're just going to leave, right? They're looking for a new home. Yes, in 24 to 72 hours, they may move on. May. They might. It's possible. Sometimes they don't. Again, here's experience talking. Sometimes they established what we call an open air hive at the location in which they're hanging. All kinds of things could happen on why this might be. The queen might be damaged. The queen might have hurt a wing. The queen might even be dead. And now that colony, that group of bees has no desire to go anywhere else. They're just stuck there. I have done so many removals from trees, just hanging in the tree. They had been there over a week. They had been there 10 days. They had been there 2 weeks. I've done a removal that had a queen and literally was there for about 4 years. Just a huge hive inside of a tree, not inside the trunk, just hanging in the branches. It's called an open air hive, and it happens. It happens here in southern Arizona. It is not abnormal. Stop saying it's not going to happen, because it does. So why call a beekeeper? A beekeeper can take Africanized bees and change the genetics of the hive. We can actually take an Africanized beehive, and by removing their queen and putting in our selective European stock line, we can actually change the genetics of that hive within a 2 to 3 month period. And then the drones, the male bees from our queen, will be European stock line, and we can do what we call a drone saturation in areas where we can put out more of our European stock line to go mate with the Africanized bees. It happens. They're a little slower. They are slower to build these bees up, and there's a little bit more to that, but I'm not going to get into it because the whole goal here is to add more European genetics to a certain area. And I can prove that that actually works. So as many people know by watching the news, reading the paper, Africanized bees can get into trouble. They can hurt people. And us beekeepers, we really don't like to see that happen. It all can be prevented. It can be prevented by education and by just being very attentive to your surroundings and knowing and respecting these beehives. With that said, by calling beekeepers, what you are doing is you are saving the bees. By leaving them be, by leaving them hang in a tree until they just move on, if they just move on, they may move on into a location where the next person that owns that property might choose to just use an exterminator. They might choose to kill them. Or they may move on to a location where nobody notices them for a while. And then they get so large and so defensive that they actually hurt somebody or somebody's animals or pets. So basically what I'm saying is the best thing to do for the community when you live in a residential area and you're within city limits and you have a swarm hanging in your tree or somewhere else very close by, the best thing to do for the community and for the bees is to call a beekeeper for a live removal. Thank you.